What's up, weebs? Welcome back to Anime Lane, the podcast where we take you down the yellow brick road of anime and have a look at everything it has to offer. As always, I'm your host, Notorious, and join me once again today as Shaun.
Hello.
And
I'm alone. There's
Melina
no one else here.
for a bit still. We've talked about that. It's fine. Don't worry about it. She's not dead.
Come back.
This week we're reaching for the stars in Royal Space Force: The Wings of Honnêamise, written and directed by Hiroyuki Yamaga, music by Ryuichi Sakamoto, animation production by Gainax. It released in Japanese theatres March 14th, 1987. It premiered in Los Angeles a month prior on February 19th, 1987 under the title Star Quest of the defunct dub that was heavily criticised for being too different from the original film and too American. It is licensed in the UK by Anime Limited and is available on home video. It is currently out of license and out of print in the US. Then we find out more about the cosplay scene once again in My Dress Up Darling. Check out episode 78 of the podcast for the main details. This week we're covering the remainder of the first season with episodes 7 through 12. Episode 7 directed by Ken Sanuma, written by Yoshihiro Hiramine. Episode 8 by Yusuke Kawakami. Episode 9 by Yuta Yamazaki. Episode 10 by Kento Nakagomi and Yuna Tsukinogaki. Episode 11 by Yusuke Yamamoto, and finally episode 12 by Yoshihiro Hiramine and Yuta Yamazaki. God, so was a gauntlet.
That is so many words and so many names.
So yeah, I guess we'll start with Royal Space Force.
Yeah, let's just do that because we both watched that first.
Yes, yeah. We kept My Dress Up Darling for chill time later on.
Yeah.
So
I needed it.
excuse me, I'm choking on Monster coming back up there. So yeah, Royal Space Force is an interesting one.
Definitely interesting is the word that pops into my head about it.
Yeah. It's a weird one because like normally from the era I first watched this, I had a tendency of like, even if I didn't necessarily like a movie at the time, if it was from like a prodigious studio, if it was from like a prodigious director, or was like some cult classic type thing, I'd probably have given it a high rating anyway for some reason. But when I look back on it, I was like, no, this must have been when I just started to go, no, my opinion is my opinion, and I rated it like probably quite fairly, because it's like, it's good, but it's not like, I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything, you know, compared to some of the other stuff we've watched from around the time that's kind of more popular or well known.
Absolutely. To me, it feels like there's a masterpiece in there, like somewhere. There's a really good movie in there. It's just they couldn't really find it in time in like either the edit or just in the story structure. Because I'm gonna be honest, to give a spoiler on my score, I gave this like a 6 out of 10.
Like I gave it,
the pacing was painful to me in some parts, and it killed a lot of the enjoyment for me.
Yeah, like I gave it a 7 because I think like majority of the movie is like enjoyably good, but it's like there's a solid maybe 30 to 40 minutes that are just kind of painful and like kill the movie dead until it comes back at the end. And
it's like dead air.
Yeah, and because like you get to a point like halfway through the movie, like it's a 2-hour movie, you get to like halfway through and you feel like you're coming to the climax of like the story arc, the character arc for the main character, and then things just sort of shift, but not like in a way of like, okay, well, we're putting a pin in this and we're going to come back to that. We need to introduce these extra things because there's this like undertone of what role do the citizens play within a war machine when a country's at war, and you know how they can be ignorant of the larger picture because of, you know, propaganda or just the country not reporting on it and stuff like that. And that was very interesting, but then it never took that anywhere because you never have any of our characters actually having to face their ignorance or like understand their role within the larger picture, because like sure, we find out that the launch has been moved to a location that's like potentially gonna cause a skirmish to break out, and it does later in the movie, but like there's nothing beyond it being stated. There's no conversation about that. There's no like, what impact does that have on the characters and stuff? It is. It's in the movie, but
it's a plot point.
And there's nothing beyond that. It doesn't build into anything. It's simply there, and they launch the rocket, and then everyone stops fighting, and it's like, okay, what was the point in this then?
Yeah, it feels like there was themes that they wanted to explore, but they just didn't. Either they didn't have the time or didn't have really the energy to flesh out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a big source of like disappointment I had watching the movie. I'm starting off negative, but when there are good parts of the movie I did like, it's just they're all sort of undercooked.
Yeah,
and that's really frustrating to me.
Yeah,
just a lot of almost across the board, so many things are just undercooked in this movie to me, which is surprising, seeing as it's 2 hours long.
Yes, I was shocked when I saw that it was 2 hours, because I thought it was shorter, and I don't think it needs to be that long. That's sort of my main issue with it. Is I think they could have edited out, like maybe 40 minutes of it and made it like an hour and 20 and had like a much more tighter, more focused movie. Rather than suddenly switching to another country we've had no real mention of, except for once when they mentioned moving the launch site, and then suddenly, we're seeing people from this country who are speaking a different language, which is interesting, but it's very distracting because it sounds like Simlish. Also, one of the characters has had their voice like clearly altered in post, and it's like very deepened, but like in a like when you see like someone on TV and their identities being hidden, that sort of like voice deepening where it just does not sound natural whatsoever, and we don't really learn.
Yeah, it's sort of like classic, sort of like a sci-fi show with an alien, but like it still speaks English. It's just got a very deepened voice.
And we don't really learn anything specific about them. We occasionally flash back to them, but it's only just to like further their movement of like, we're gonna attack them, we're gonna try and steal the rocket, and like
we're gonna get them, we're gonna get them.
Yeah, it's like, okay,
we're gonna get them.
Why? Who are you? Why are you at war? What is happening?
Who are you? Where are we? No. That is the entire point of the other like nation. It's just there to go no, you are not paying attention to that story. You're paying attention to this story now. For like 5 minutes, and then they disappear again.
Yep, and then they randomly come back again. Oh, God.
It sucks because the other nation is interesting just from like the aesthetic and theme they're going for, because like to go off what I figured they were going with, the main country is a sort of very much like not fantasy, but like other world sort of Japan sort of country in like the 20th century. Whereas the other nation, I want to say, is more based on like maybe India?
Yeah.
Or some sort of like southeastern country like that, which means there's interesting stuff, but they don't focus on them enough to really give them enough character, which is sort of makes them more one note than I feel like they should be.
Yeah. I think both nations have like a very, like, just from a visual standpoint, like a very rich tapestry of history that's visually communicated, but we never really get like actually communicated to us as an audience in a way that we can understand and latch on to. Because like, sure, you can do a lot of visual storytelling, but if you just say, well, there's a lot of really interesting history here, if you don't expound upon that in a way where we then feel like we're in the know, it's pointless. Because it's like,
definitely.
We don't know anything. Like, there's a king.
Yeah.
There's a king, but okay, what's with the royal family? Like, we don't learn anything.
There's a prince that shows up, and like he's apparently got like an important role in the government, but like again, not expanded upon, so we don't know exactly how much power the royal family actually has, and whether it's ceremonial, or whether this is more of like an actual absolute monarchy.
Because
We
then
can't tell.
there's like a scene later where like the head of the Space Force is like sitting down with like three shady monk guys
Corporate
who
masters?
clearly have some influence upon the government, but seem to be like from the shadows pulling the strings, because they're the ones trying to sort of just have the Space Force like implode in on itself. And it's like, okay, I don't understand enough about this structure to really understand how this is affecting it in any way.
Yeah, maybe there's some sort of allegory that like a Japanese viewer would like understand immediately that we just don't, but that doesn't really help us.
I mean, maybe?
It feels like there's just something we're missing, that like the movie feels like it's obvious, but so it's not telling us, but we just don't have. I'm trying to just find an explanation basically on that.
I mean, possibly, I guess if it's like, you know, maybe it's very Cold War coded, so if there's something from like the kind of immediate time post America pulling out, that like, you know, the royal family in Japan had a more present what the fuck am I trying to say? A more presence in politics, and the influence of the state and the government were kind of there trying to do their thing, and there were other people. I don't know, like maybe
We don't know.
we don't know. Yeah, maybe there is a part of like Japanese political history that like we're just unaware of, that this is taking influence from.
Or
though
we're
usually-
grasping at serious straws, but I don't know.
Yeah, because like I feel like if that were the case, usually in the kind of process of reading up on a movie to write the little intros and to just kind of get more familiar with something if I haven't seen it before, you kind of come across these things as like talking points for people, especially like if it's something licensed outside of Japan and, you know, English viewers speaking about it. Like there's usually people going, what the fuck? And then someone going, oh, it's because of this. Or there's you know just articles written about, you know, its reflection of said thing. But I never really came across that. I came across more about issues with the composer distancing himself from the film afterwards than what the meaning of the movie is.
Oh, that's interesting, but it's not to do with the plot, which is what we're focusing on.
Yeah, it's
so,
like this,
what the fuck?
This isn't helpful.
No. It feels like, and this is very blatant at the end of the movie, it feels like someone made up an entire history of the lore of this whole world, but the movie expects you to somehow know it already, or they wanted to try and tell the story without telling you, so you'd sort of pick it up, but it doesn't do it well enough for you to actually pick it up enough.
Because I mean, we've been talking about like the whole political and like worldview of the movie, because that's like what the majority of the movie actually spends its time on. But there's also a weird religious undertone to it as well.
Yeah, I didn't expect that, and I didn't expect it to be like so. Sympathetic isn't the right word, but it's, when I say it like that, it feels like I don't want it talked about, but like I do. It's just the fact that it's more in the sense that like the first time we're introduced to the whole religion aspect, it's with Preacher Girl, whose name I've forgotten.
I don't know. She has one of those non-real names, because like there's a lot of close to Japanese but not quite Japanese names in the movie, because it's a world clearly different from ours. Again, not that we ever get any information on that, but like the main character Shiritsugu, his last name I don't know, but it's like it's a name very Japanese sounding, but then you read it and you're like, it's not a real name.
No, it's not.
And she's one of the same. It's like it begins with an R, and it's a weird name.
Yeah, I've just called her Preacher Girl the whole time.
That's fair.
She's introduced like sort of introducing the religious aspect, but the religious aspect is very fire and brimstone. Humans are sinners who desecrate the whole world and stuff, and it's like, this isn't a religion I really want to like. I don't think I want to know or follow, because this sounds kind of fucked.
It's very like early Old Testament Judeo-Christian coded, but like again, it has like no real impact on the movie. It kind of tries to build it into Shiro's character arc, but like again, his character arc stops dead like halfway through, and that's when we kind of really get to see the preacher girl again.
Yeah.
And then that's when the worst part of the movie happens anyway.
Yeah.
And she kind of never turns up again after like maybe 15 minutes of that section, and then it's like she appears at the end and the credits roll after an abstract like flashback of the development of the world, which flashing to her implies that it's meant to do with the religious stuff, but like it kind of doesn't. It's so weird.
This is a weird fucking movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes. The reason I wanted to bring it up specifically is because the way she's introduced and the way the religion introduced felt less like an actual sort of religion and more like a cult.
I was gonna
say
it's very cult-ish, especially when you see the quote-unquote church that they live in later on, which is just a fucking shack with no one else, even though she mentions other people. So it's very questionable. But then again,
yeah, I was. You go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, then again, that sort of does tie into the fact that, like, in Japan, cults are kind of like a worryingly common thing, and like people can lose a lot of money to cults, which I don't know if is maybe the point when we first meet the girl and they're like living in the house, they lose power, and then the house gets torn down. Like, that's happened in real life before. And I don't know if that's what that was trying to hint at, but then her going and living with, like, essentially a commune for the rest of the movie, but we don't really see any of the people. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, even when, like, she loses power and her house gets fucking bulldozed, it feels more like the anger, like, the movie's trying to point you towards is, like, the government and not any sort of fault thing. At least that's what I got.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's hard to say whether we're meant to sympathize with the religious aspect, because there's not... It like you say, it's undercooked. So I don't really understand the movie's stance in it, because at one point it feels like it's trying to sympathize, but at the other times it feels like it's just not. It's just sort of presented factually, like it. I don't know. It's so weird.
It's just it feels like this movie. It feels like it wanted to be interpreted a certain way, but it unintentionally left itself open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Which means whatever intended message was there has been completely lost. Like, just in the way it's been told.
Because it's, you know, I mentioned it's very Cold War coded, it's very space race coded, and like if that had been the main thing, and like this whole larger conflict between these two nations, if that had been like the focus, and like just them trying to make the rocket and get into space but not really caring too much as an organization about like their role in the war, because they just want to fulfill their desire to get to space, that would have been interesting, because well, that's been the focus of movies before for the West when it comes to like astronaut movies and stuff like that. So I don't...
It's classic, but like it's good. It's a good story, and it's an interesting story. And like the whole ending section where like the climax of the movie where it's like in the skirmish and they're desperately trying to get the rocket to take off. That is a genuinely exciting part of the movie. It's the best part of the movie.
Oh, 100%.
But like, again, it's only in those like 10 minutes where it feels like it actually like ramps up to that, and the rest of the movie is either trying to be build up for that or build up for other shit that doesn't really matter by that point. so it just feels weird.
Yeah. It's a very hyper detailed world too. And I find that interesting, but again, we don't really get enough exploration of it to really understand, because there's clearly like a technological difference between the nation that we mainly follow and the other one, because the planes, as we see in the skirmish at the end, like the planes for the nation about to launch the rocket are still kind of like propeller based. They're still kind of that in-between stage of like World War II and like Vietnam-esque kind of era of
The transition from like propeller planes to like modern sort of jet engines.
Whereas the other nation that's trying to steal the rocket have like jet planes essentially, or like have more modern ideas of jet engines. And so like there is like some difference there, and like they seem more technologically developed even when you're seeing like their war room as well. But again, it's another thing that it's like it's visually communicated, but like we're not really given anything to understand why or the implications of that, and like is it meant to be America versus Russia? Because obviously Russia got someone into space first, so therefore the more technologically developed nation would be America in this case, because they did have more advanced war machine than the Russians at the time during the earlier Cold War, kind of when the space race was at its height. It's so confusing. There's so many different things it could be, but it never clearly settles on any of them.
Yeah, it doesn't really find any foundation to really build itself on. It's all just sort of implication and suggestion. Which, it can work in some movies, but just in this one, it just doesn't for me.
No. There's potential for such a good movie as well.
There's a masterpiece in here, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I swear, somewhere in like a vault there is like a 90-page Bible of this world that goes into detail on the history and the lore and stuff. But we're just never gonna see that reach the light of day, possibly.
Yeah, definitely not.
So the whole movie just feels undercooked, and that's sad.
Yeah.
I did like the little kid who just frowns at everyone, though. They were cute.
Mana, I think, was their name. They did just have a perpetual sad face.
Angie.
Yeah.
Best character. Should have followed them around the whole time. Except for that one scene.
Yeah.
We can't dance around it anymore. It just happens.
No, there's like a weird one-off scene where the main character tries to sexually assault the preacher girl.
For no reason.
For no reason. No, I mean when you're rewatching the movie, it's so uncomfortably building up to that. Like when you've seen it and you know that is what the culmination of that scene is, you're watching it and you're like, oh my god, there is such intention behind how this sequence is structured that it is clearly very much building up to that moment, and I don't like that whatsoever, because like you're seeing a lot of stuff very much from his perspective and his gaze, not to bring the male gaze into this, but it essentially is in a way where it's framing it like there's a lot of little detailed animations that otherwise probably wouldn't have been there if it was just a normally framed scene, where like the way she moves her legs when she's readjusting her position, then when she brushes her hair behind her ear, and then when she gets up and moves, it's very much from his perspective of watching it. And so it's there's a lot of intent behind it that makes it just so much worse that they did that. Like they clearly intended for that to be what happened. They put the build up to it, but ultimately for what outcome, it doesn't serve the movie at all.
No. It feels like it almost feels like a shock moment in the film just to have a shock moment.
Yeah.
Because, like, from my perspective, there was, looking back, there was a lot of build-up, but for me, it felt very out of nowhere for the first time, like, watching. And then, like, it happens, she defends herself, like, and then the scene cuts to tomorrow, and he goes up to her, basically, and he's like, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me, I'm so sorry. And then, for some fucking reason, the film makes her apologize
The one thing
for existing.
I will say about that is that at least he's confused. They don't have him fight back against, like, her apology and say, no, I'm the one that's in the wrong. But they at least have him be confused that she's the one apologizing now. So that's at least something, but at the same time, it's weird that the whole thing happened in the first place, and that this was ultimately how the film decided to end the whole thing, and then just move on and never bring it up again.
And if they wanted to, like, go the angle of, oh, the society is really fucked when it comes to stuff like that, and, like, she's basically been told that, like, if that happens, that it's somehow her fault, that's fine. That's an interesting angle to go, but the thing is, again, it's the crux of the movie. It's so undercooked. Because they don't bring up the scene ever again. It's like it didn't happen. So the conclusion of that scene really feels like the movie is going, it was her fault for being
and then, like, she just never appears again until the scene right before the credits.
No, before they try and give them a sweet sort of goodbye scene, which is like it not fucking earned.
No.
After the fucking sexual assault scene.
Oh God.
It's genuinely anger inducing to me. That it's just played off so terribly. Yeah. And so I want to say unjustly almost.
It's very nonchalant, I think. And that's, it's just not, it's not aged well at all.
No, I can't. I said to you, like, after I watched the movie, that, like, I feel like I want to say it's aged the worst, but no, even then, this was kind of fucked, right? Yeah. Like, there's no way you can, even at the time, I feel like this was kind of fucked.
I mean, it's a weird one where, like, in terms of anime and stuff, this kind of thing, less in the sense of then victim blaming, it was like an occurrence that happened a lot. I mean, isn't there a sexual assault scene in Akira too?
It's been a while, I might have forgotten.
But I don't know, I think, just generally late 80s, 90s, 2000s, there was a very different view on sexual assault and stuff like that.
I mean, I do say that, and, like, I do remember when I watched it, I was actually reminded of that one scene in Blade Runner, which has a sort of similar setup and sort of thing like that, where, like, Deckard, the character is usually, like, the hero of the whole movie, does kind of force himself a little on the love interest there, but, like, they don't make her apologize to him right after. That's the thing that really fucks with me. That, like, they force the victim to apologize for being assaulted. That's what messes with me so fucking much.
God.
Worst scene in the movie by far, but
definitely.
Doesn't serve the rest of the movie.
No. But then a lot of scenes don't actually serve the rest of the movie.
No. That's just the most egregious. Yeah.
The music's very good, but also at times very out of place. I think that is just something I want to add. And it is a very, very well made soundtrack. It's very textured, a lot of different styles that are very... you would think would be very juxtaposing, but because the world is built in such a way where there's a lot of different visual aesthetics, it works. But then there's some times where whatever they're playing over, say, like a montage doesn't always necessarily fit. There's like a portion of a montage kind of early on where like they're going through the process, I think, of building like the rocket, and like showing some of the different stages, which you don't actually know is that until the end of the movie, when you're seeing like the rocket go up and all the different stages, kind of happen. And it kind of descends into like a weird SNES Final Fantasy-esque sound.
Okay, that wasn't just me thinking that the moment that sort of sound came up. Okay, I was immediately thinking like either Final Fantasy or it was Chrono Trigger or Mario RPG or something like that. Just in the sort of the way the synth was.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. That's like the one moment of the soundtrack where I'm like, I don't think this works at all. And I guess this is kind of the part where I could bring up the tidbit I found out about the composer, where like he was very vocal about his support for the film in the run up to it. He'd done a lot of promotion for it, because he's actually Ryuichi Sakamoto. I just want to make sure I've got that name correct there. Let me just double check. Ryuichi Sakamoto. He is an Academy Award winning composer because he wrote or he co-composed the soundtrack for The Last Emperor, which obviously won Academy Award for Best Score. He's also done a bunch of other movies. He did Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which is a David Bowie movie. He's done a bunch of stuff. But then after the movie came out, he kind of distanced himself, never brought it up again. And one of the producers says that they think it may come down to a dispute that happened late in the film's production, where the decision on the music's placement, timing, and cue within the film, either whether it came down to him or to the sound director. I believe it was sound director. I could be misremembering what I read. But like it was very much like who it came down to, and I think it ended up coming down to the other person, which is why Sakamoto's never really discussed it, mentioned it since. And so I find that quite interesting, and maybe that's why some parts of it seem out of place, because it's maybe not where he intended it to be, and it maybe wasn't a track that would end up being in the movie had he been the one choosing the delay of the music, because there was a lot more tracks composed for the film than made it in. There was like 15 out of 40 plus or something I read made it into the final film. So yeah, that was an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, that is actually like fascinating. We're gonna learn that like his actual intention was to put more of the 16-bit synths in the movie. The whole soundtrack should have been like a Final Fantasy soundtrack.
Oh yeah, he also composed the music for The Revenant.
Yeah, I just saw that right now because I just pulled up his Wikipedia page, and that's a sudden drop.
Yeah.
In like his filmography. It's funny because it goes like the things that get mentioned in like one of the opening like paragraphs is Last Emperor 1987, Sheltering Sky 1990, Little Buddha 1993, and then suddenly it jumps to The Revenant in 2015.
Yeah.
Where was he for 2 decades?
I mean, he was still working. Like looking at his list of films, there's still a lot of stuff here, because he also did Harakiri, Death of a Samurai, which is a remake of a 50s or 60s Japanese samurai movie that was the remake is directed by Takashi Miike, who's quite a popular Japanese director. He's directed One Missed Call. Okay.
That's gonna be a fun mention for later.
Yeah. As well. The JoJo's Bizarre Adventure live action adaptation. He's directed a lot of stuff. Those are the only two coming to my mind, though, for some reason, even though he has done a lot more than that. Ichi the Killer, I think, is probably his biggest one, which got some kind of contention when it released over here, because it's very violent. But yeah.
Apparently, he also did a Black Mirror episode. Huh.
Oh, interesting. He also done a couple of video games too. Not ones I particularly recognize, but he did do them. But yeah. That's I guess that's Royal Space Force, because I don't think there's much more.
We kind of got everything we thought out of the way. It's sad. Again, it feels like there's a good movie in there if you just cut some things, trim some of the fat, and then maybe retool a little bit of the story structure. You could have had a really great movie here.
Yeah.
But personally, I can't put it above a 6 out of 10.
That's fair. I'll stick with 7. Yeah. I mean, at least Gainax went on and done, great work.
Yeah.
Obviously Evangelion. They also did Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, Gunbuster. Actually, was Gunbuster before this? It was around the same time.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
I know Gunbuster was before Eva.
89 was Gunbuster. But I think that was like a co-production. I don't think Gainax solely started doing their own thing until Royal Space Force came out.
I do remember, because I did look up a little bit of the Wikipedia page after I read it, not too much, but I did see the mention of Hideki Anno. Just sort of pop up, and like he basically said at one point that his response, he made Gunbuster a little bit in response to Royal Space Force, and he basically got the message of, okay, when you send them into space, make them half-naked girls. And that'll do it.
There are a lot of naked girls in Gunbuster. That's
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Gainax, were a very good studio until they fell apart, and then things got weird and complicated. But at least the rights for all their projects are now with whoever they should be with, meaning Ava is with Anno, Gurren Lagann is with and what's his name, Imaishi over in Trigger. I assume whoever needs to own Nadia owns Nadia.
Good for them.
And I assume Gunbuster is also with Anno now too.
It should be, yeah. And
Fully Cooley will be with fucking whatever production company. I actually, Fully Cooley's a very interesting one, because the original 6 episodes are like highly regarded as classics, and then for some reason Toonami in America, or I guess Adult Swim, decided to make like 4 sequels that no one actually gives a shit about or likes, but they keep doing them. Because you had progressive, then alternative, grunge, and then Shugazi, which all came out like way, way later. I'm just trying to find like when they came out. Sequel seasons, let's see. So progressive came out in 2018. No, that can't be right. Is it? That seems later than I thought. Yeah, 2018, and the first part of it came out in 2000. So 18 years later.
When the ship had sailed.
Yes. Yeah. I think literally the only thing people actually care about is like the soundtracks for them at this point. Okay. But yeah, sorry, that's a weird tangent.
No, that was more interesting than a good chunk of Royal Space Force.
Gunbuster, Fully Cooley are things definitely we will get to at some point. Yeah. I'd love to do Gunbuster.
The moment I saw Anno's name, I was like, well, that's gonna be on a short list for me.
Yeah, I really want to do it either maybe this season or start of next. It'd be very good to do. But yeah. You're a 6 out of 10. I'm a 7 out of 10. I think both very valid and fair scores. So yeah, we'll move on to My Dress Up Darling, the remainder of the first
second half. Let's go.
So.
This was such a feel good show. I love this. This was a really good show. After all the big shit Royal Space Force was trying to do, it was really nice to just have something to wind down.
Yeah.
And cool off with. Poor Gojo couldn't cool off for 1 second.
Yeah, the first season is very much just Gojo trying to, like, keep himself sane.
Respectful.
And respectful, yeah.
While the entire universe goes, no.
No.
Gojo and the cosplay bitches he pulled by being autistic.
And he only gets more of them later in the manga.
God damn. I really like those Hina dolls. This was so fun.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying that, but it was.
Yeah. It's weird how it feels like the first season covered more than it did from what I remembered from first watching it, but, like, you know, it still covers, like, a good chunk of stuff. And I like that it gets into more kind of smaller cosplay and events as in the second half, where there's, like, little more one-offs, where you've got the fucking tanned prisoner girl, Veronica, I think her name
Veronica
was.
something, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got the succubus.
Who's not meant to be sexy in the actual thing she's from.
No.
But because it's this show.
Yes.
Gojo's so dense.
He
sorry,
is.
just bringing up the succubus. He's like, how... He doesn't know what they are at one point. He has to ask, and I'm just like, how did you spawn in like a month ago as a fully formed human, but you didn't know anything?
To be fair, he's lived a very secluded life.
Yeah.
So far, he hasn't watched much anime. He hasn't played many video games. He doesn't read manga. He's just sort of existed.
He's just sort of painting the dolls, and that's been him for like a good, 17 years?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, if he was happy, that's fine, but, like, Jesus, dude, go outside.
I mean, he's now going outside frequently now. So
Yeah,
that's, you know, good. And his granddad also points out that it's having a positive effect on his work on the Hina dolls, which is a nice little...
yeah, I love that
touch.
That was so nice to, like, just have that scene, because, like, the previous, like, few episodes, he's been very worried that he's just sort of been neglecting his practices, and there's that whole part in one of the episodes where the granddad says, if you miss even one day, like, you'll have to spend, like, 3 days getting that skill back.
Yeah.
So the fact that, like, he gets confirmation, basically, that he can keep doing, like, the cosplay stuff and not lose any skill was really nice.
Because I think that, like, Gojo is a very literal person, and so he probably didn't take that the way his granddad intended it, of, like, as long as you're doing art, that is probably going to be beneficial. As long as you're practicing artistic expression, then, you know, it's going to have a positive impact on the Hina doll stuff. And Gojo, being Gojo, probably just thought, he means I need to do this every single day, and if I miss a day, I'm fucked.
Just like me, for real, I would have done the same thing. Did you hear that? And coming from someone you trust, your immediate thought is going to be, they wouldn't lie to me, I have to do this. There's no, like, they're not just saying flowery language, it's literal.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got introduced, we were introduced to Juju? Is that how you say
that's her cosplay name. Her real name is Shinju Inui, I believe.
I'm just gonna call her Juju if that's
Fair
okay.
enough.
It's faster. But yeah, we got introduced to her in episode 6, but we actually learn about her more throughout this sort of block.
Yeah.
She's fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad for her that her younger sister looks older than her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's... Yeah, I don't really know how to tackle that whole part at all. I mean, I like that they went in the opposite direction of what you would expect with that character. Being that they didn't focus on the fact that she has massive
planets.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ.
by having her cosplay as a male, which means that they did their best to hide that.
Yeah. That the episode brought to you by Binders.
Yeah.
Lifesavers in cosplay.
Which even those planets can't be contained by binders.
No. They tried. They tried so hard. And they succeeded for a while.
Yeah. But she's like... They mention she's in middle school. So she's like, what?
At the most 14.
Yeah. Don't like that. Don't like that.
It's weird.
One thing I like about where the manga goes from here, there's more adult characters introduced, or like older characters. Like you have like people marrying in Gojo's age, and then you have like a couple of adult cosplayers who like they also like, again, it builds into that learning about cosplay thing where they give them sage advice and, you know, help them out. I'm just glad it didn't go into like more middle schoolers showing up. That would have been so weird.
Yeah, just don't don't do that show. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't. The whole like I like that you sort of mentioned this in the last episode, like the manga sort of went more into like actual step-by-step stuff and cosplay, and more of like an actual how-tos, which were sadly cut. But it feels like these blocks episodes sort of reintroduced them in like a little bit in some sections.
Yeah, it's always present where like Gojo will explain how he done something. It's just that like usually in the manga it's like there'll be several panels that like actually go step by step and like how you do something, whereas Gojo's just like, oh, I bought these fake nails and then I filed them down and made them look like teeth and that's a good substitute. Whereas like you'll get I can't remember if they do it for the teeth specifically, that's just the one that's jumping in mind for here, where like they'll also explain like, I think they explained how to apply them too. I can't remember because the anime kind of just brushes over that. Marion just sort of pops them in. But yeah, so it's usually like more infographic style, whereas like, the anime
infographics that were like actually like pulling me on. They're like, okay, they've tried to like at least show that a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's just sort of nice to see.
Yeah, no, I always appreciate that like there's information on and helpful tips for cosplayers if someone's reading this and they enjoy cosplay. Obviously slightly different over here. We don't have, you know, some of the same things at our disposal. Like we don't have Halloween stores in the UK.
No. There's like maybe one sort of costume store like near me, but that's just uptown in Edinburgh, and I doubt there's like any sort of that's not a common thing.
No, and there's no like wig store at all. No, you can't easily get wigs in the UK.
No,
gotta order them online.
Yeah, it's much more of a hassle. You don't have like full on floors of like a store that they can just go to here.
Because that's another thing I don't think the anime really covers, is that like a lot of the stores and stuff are based on like real places. Like the
I imagined.
Yeah, the afterwards of the volumes usually mention like which store the author went to for reference and like thanks them and the sort of like afterword for like letting them go there and reference them and mention them and stuff like that. So that's really cool. But yeah. Sorry, I'm talking more about the manga than the anime.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So like Swallowtail, the wig shop's based on like an actual real wig store, I believe.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like other things to bring up from the actual show, but it's like it's just very good. It's very wholesome, sweet.
Yeah,
funny.
It's more slice of life stuff. I like the sort of more, we're getting more of a look into like Juju's sort of mindset, her insecurities and stuff, because she's introduced as like very confident and a lot more in the know compared to like Marin and Gojo and stuff. But then we sort of learned that, like, oh no, she's still got her problems, and like she doesn't really do like any of the actual photography stuff. Her sister is the expert on that.
Yeah, she's a tsundere.
Very much.
Yes.
She gets like touched.
Don't
she gets,
say
her
it
hand
like
held.
that.
I didn't know how else to say it. She gets like her hand held for like a second
Yeah.
by like Gojo, and she's immediately on the floor.
Juju.exe has stopped responding. Because she goes to an all-girls school, which she mentions there, which means she's never had contact with a boy before, I guess.
Nah. So she just like Gojo's trying to like get like just be very like thankful that she's like really liked his stuff, because like he's having a whole like sort of meltdown almost, that like he's feeling like the appreciation of someone enjoying his work.
Yeah.
And all she could think about is like, oh my hand, like, oh my hand, oh my god, like, oh my hand.
She's also at that point terrified by the abandoned building and the thunderstorm in combination as well. So like she's already frantic
fair.
as it is. And then he goes and holds her hand and just short circuits her, I guess.
Yeah. Also learned a little bit about cameras this time.
Yeah. Which is very interesting because they mentioned DSLR and then they mentioned that they don't need to change the lens on their one, and I was like, I don't think that's a DSLR then, because the whole point of a DSLR is you can change the lens.
Yeah.
If they can't change the lens, then I believe what they have is a bridge camera, which also has more limitations on your ability to like control the settings, but they talk about shutter speed and stuff like that, so they probably, I don't know, maybe it's a type of camera I'm not familiar with. Well, I guess we should mention for people who maybe who don't listen to us all the time or new here, we have background in this, so I know cameras very well when it comes to both photography and video cameras. So like when I seen they couldn't change the lens, my immediate thing was, I've never encountered a DSLR where you couldn't take the lens off. That's like one of the like features of DSLR, really, because even like they're professional cameras even at entry level. So yeah, maybe it's just a type I'm not familiar with. Maybe a type of camera you can only get in Japan. I don't know. Maybe,
yeah.
But yeah, Marin then gets convinced to go headfirst into saving for one. Which is a nice little story arc that goes on in the manga after this, and I assume will be part of season 2. Of her like working and saving for the camera. But yeah,
we also learned that she's got a part-time job as like a part-time model.
Oh yeah, she does half mention it prior to this, but then it's only really she gets into it now, where she shows Gojo a magazine and he's like, what the fuck?
You're a model?
Because there's a difference between being a model and then being a model that's published in an actual magazine.
Yeah, like she's an actual model.
Yes.
Like big time.
Yeah. And she
I mean, makes sense.
Yeah, and then she's just like, yeah. And then that's it. She's...
Yeah, it's just like, why is it such a big deal? That's just what I do.
There's more like, I think, life of the slice of life here. Where like we're getting in just not the day-to-day, but like the more kind of daily activities of Gojo and Marin. Like, at this point, and it's safe to say this for the rest of the manga at this point too, they're practically dating and don't even realize it.
Yeah, big time. They go into a love hotel like near the end of the series. Come on.
But like before that, they spend a whole day like going around shopping for clothes. They go to a manga cafe. Like they're practically on an actual date, and neither of them clock it at all.
Well, I mean, Marin sort of like clocks the home date.
Yeah,
that's about it.
That's the only one she really becomes aware of.
But she doesn't register the other ones, because if she did, she'd be freaking out the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. This is where she also says she'll send a picture of her in a very revealing cosplay to Gojo as a joke.
Yeah, just a typical joke. Totally.
Yes. She sent him a picture of herself in a swimsuit, so I wouldn't be surprised if she did send him a picture of her in...
Yeah, I was expecting that to like pop up like later anyway.
Yeah. It's also worth mentioning, I guess, at this point, like, we always assume people have seen what we're talking about, but like it's been mentioned at least 3 times, and 2 very obvious times, that like Gojo jacks off to Marine, and I just want to say the manga drops this immediately after that last one from the Love Hotel, because I always found that weird as it is. But yeah, it very much drops that.
Good, because like it may be funny the first couple times, like you kind of expect it, and then like after that you're just like, come on, dude, really?
Yeah,
I don't need to know.
And like at least the first couple of times are subtle-ish. The first time he just says to his Hina doll, "Oh, can you turn away?" because he's woke up with morning wood.
Yeah. And
then the second time, it's just a line of like, "Oh, when you sent that picture, a lot happened," which is an inference rather than, an explicit
not
thing.
like an explicit thing.
The second time, he's fully repeating her name, blushed face, seeing him from the top on bed, right hand out of camera, out of frame, and it's like, that's just too on the nose.
I'm gonna be honest, for me, I clocked it on some level, but like I mostly just kind of didn't as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just figured it was more he's like the Gojo thing of like he's just fighting with his inner demons to be respected.
I think he lost that battle a long time ago.
Yeah, I know, but still. Marine has to be knows what she's doing though, come on.
Yeah, like at some point she's gotta know that like she's
like that whisper.
Yeah, like at some point she's gotta fully know she's like teasing him, like straight up.
Yeah. I mean, but then again, in the Love Hotel, she full on straddles him and doesn't even like clock like what the implications.
Oh yeah, I mean both of them have that moment of like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah. And it's not until they hear someone else like doing that in another room that they're like, oh wait, we're still in the Love Hotel.
Yeah. I've lost my fiddle magnet.
Oh no! Don't fiddle on the podcast, please.
No, I have a magnet I mess around with just to keep my hands occupied while we're talking, and it's gone. I dropped it somewhere. But yeah, no, the Love Hotel thing's a bit strange. As far as I understood it, you had to be 18 to book a Love Hotel in Japan. I could be wrong.
I mean, another couple that comes in goes that does sort of imply that with like, what are those minors, huh?
Yeah, she's like, oh, they're high school kids, and then she's like, oh, they're at that age where they're getting curious about that. How cute! Yeah. And I'm like, ma'am, I don't think you should be as chill with this as you are.
Yeah, I feel like the implication is that like maybe anyone who like actually booked them in maybe has a suspicion, but they don't have like actual proof, so they just don't bother.
Well, the structure of Love Hotels is that you don't see the reception, and the receptionist doesn't see you.
Ah, okay.
It's all hands under, like, through the window, and the window has like a shutter, like a blind type thing on it, because it's all about anonymity and privacy, because Love Hotels in Japan are mostly used for affairs.
No shit. Then yeah, there's gonna be like people that maybe shouldn't be there slipping through the cracks. That's just you're begging for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, that's such a weird cultural thing, isn't it?
Huh? Yeah. I started thinking about that while watching the episode, and I was like, don't think about it, don't think about it, don't think about it.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole that the show's not going to go into, and you don't want to go into right now.
But yeah, no, it's a very... it's just a chill, wholesome series where you're really rooting for the characters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it very quickly rose to like the top of my list when I first watched it, and then, you know, I read the manga, and it's still very much at the top of my list. I just really wish they would fucking get together already.
Yeah, but when they get together, that's when it's gonna end.
I hope not. Like, I hope it would continue beyond that, at least for a bit. Because I think there's a lot of longevity in the story idea. Because even if when it eventually ends, like, it's not gonna have covered everything to like Gojo becoming a professional, whatever the Hina doll makers are called. There's a specific name I can't remember. Kashirashi, I believe it is.
I thought it was something that began with a K.
Yeah,
they mentioned it a few times in the show.
And like you can flash forward to like how he's doing that whilst also running like a cosplay, tailor business thing, and marrying's, you know, his wife or whatever, who knows.
It's a cute little domestic story there.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't pull at Bleach, which Bleach was weird at the end, but that's a conversation for another time. Yeah, it's just, you know, none of the love interests were set up well enough, so it just feels weird when it does, and they have a kid at the end. So, you know.
Woo.
Yeah. Anyway, it's weird. It's one of those ones where like there's not, as much as it's fun to talk about, there's not a lot to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I feel like we've been having that problem for this whole section, and like that feels bad to say because it's a really good show and there were great moments, but like we basically keep jumping over like moments we remember.
It's not like Evangelion where it actively promotes an interesting discussion about its themes or its characters or its storyline or life. Yeah, like I think most of our episode is less about the show and more about our life experience as a response to that.
But that's what the show wants, and that's the perfect thing to do for that episode. I love that episode.
No, it's a great episode.
It's one of my favorites. You should listen to it, dear listener, over at animelane.youtube or whatever.
youtube.com/u/anime-lanecast, I believe.
Go there.
Or you can just click the little profile icon right below this video and immediately get there.
Do whatever you need to do. Watch our stuff. Anyway.
Hold on, it's simpler. youtube.com/anime_lane. Simple as that. It is episode 58.
Just cut it. Just cut it in editing. It is episode 58.
58, and it's like 2 hours long because it's a very good conversation about the whole of Evangelion and the whole of end of Evangelion.
Yeah. Anyway, enough shilling our own stuff. We can't do that. We can't do that kind of conversation here. What we're trying to say.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, you know, now that we've finished it, what's your score?
9.
9
out of 10.
For now, I'm willing to give it a 10 out of 10. And I'm basing this also on my experience with the manga. Because it continues to be like an absolute highlight when like a new volume comes out and I get to just sit and experience the whatever part of the story it is. I just hope it sticks the landing whenever it gets to the end.
Yeah, it would really suck if like it somehow didn't stick the landing after being so good for so long.
Yeah, I mean, like, not to again shift the conversation, but like Oshinoko recently just ended in the manga, and I haven't been keeping up with it for a bit. But I have seen some of the reception, and it's not been a great reception, which has made me very nervous to
Oshinoko.
To be fair, I think I've talked about this before, where it's like it's highly like a common thing where manga kind of go on for so long that it's inevitably not gonna have a satisfying conclusion for the most part. I think it's just, it always seems to be the case where they fumble the ending. But yeah, anyway.
We'll get to that and maybe whenever we get there.
Yeah, I mean, we still to watch season 2. I can't remember if season 3's been announced. I think it might have. But we'll get to season 2 eventually. You know.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep asking for it because I loved season 1 so much, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. So yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of Anime Lane. You can look forward to the EX episode of My Dress Up Darling at some point now as well. I will also put the reminder here again, since it's only now a couple of weeks away as this episode comes out. The first episode in January will not be a full proper episode. It's just going to be an EX cut because it's going to be coming out on the 3rd of January. And rather than miss a week, we'll just put in a little bit of a filler thing for people to relive some nice moments of, I don't know, I got like 3 different ones I could do, so
it is it is unapologetically a filler episode.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you can't watch it.
Yeah,
watch it.
Yep.
Listen to it.
So yeah,
like
we'll see. Actually, no, hold on, now that I think about it, I think it will be next week that episode is coming out, so don't expect a new episode because this is airing on like the 27th, I believe.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, so have a happy New Year.
Hope you enjoyed your Christmas.
Yeah, or whatever holiday you may be celebrating in this holiday season. And we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks for a new episode. But remember, EX cut next week for whatever it might be. I still haven't decided. It's like a month beforehand here. Anyway, bye.
Bye.